Welcome to the Crochet Challenge for Warm Up America 2019. Let's get started on the lap blanket. All right, to begin your lap blanket, you'll need to work with color A and create a slip knot. Place that loop on your hook. And then you'll chain 85. Now for this tutorial, I'll just be working on a little snippet of the pattern, so I will chain a fewer amount, but since you're working on the lap blanket, go ahead and chain 85. Now once you have your 85 chains, we'll start on the first row, and we need to find the second chain from the hook. So not this one, but this guy right here. Now you can work in any loop of this chain that you're comfortable with. I prefer to work in the back bump of the chain. So I'll just flip it over so I can see that bump right here. And we'll be working with half double crochet stitches. So wrap the yarn around your hook, insert it into that chain, that second one, and we'll half double crochet. And we'll do that for the next chain. And then just repeat this for every chain in your foundation. We'll make one half double crochet in every chain. Now when you get to the end of your row, your work should look something like this, only of course yours will be quite a bit longer than mine here. Go ahead and make sure you have 84 half double crochets in this first row. It's not super important for the first 8 rows as we're just working one stitch into every stitch, but when we get into the textured pattern in the middle, there will be a difference and you will need to have 84 stitches for it all to work out. So next we're moving on to row number 2, and actually rows 2 through 8 are the same. What we'll do is we'll chain 1, then we'll turn our work. And this chain 1 we aren't counting as a stitch. So we're just going to pretend like that's not even there. And I'll work a half double crochet in my first stitch. So right here. I'm working under both loops of the stitch. And then just repeat. We'll make one half double crochet into every stitch. Okay, once you get to the end of your row, we want to take care that we're not adding or dropping a stitch. We want our edges to be nice and even, and we need our stitch count to stay the same. So what I like to do is look at it from the top, and I can find my last V. Well, that's how I know that's my last stitch. So I will go ahead and half double crochet in that last stitch. And it's a good practice to count your stitches at the end of every row. But let's be honest, who wants to count 84 stitches at the end of every single one of these rows? So what I like to do is use stitch markers. So I know that this is the last stitch because I just made it. I'm just going to mark that with a stitch marker. If you don't have some of these, bobby pins work really great, or you can just cut up a scrap piece of yarn and tie that on the stitch. Now from here I'll continue on to row 3, and this is the same repeat, so I'm chaining 1 and I'm turning my work, and then my stitch marker is in this first stitch. So that's letting me know, hey, this is your first stitch, this is where you need to work. So I will just go ahead and remove that stitch marker. I know it feels a little redundant here on the end of the row, but after you have worked that first stitch, then we'll go ahead and replace it in that stitch, and then you'll know when you come back to this stitch after we've worked all of this round, or all of this row, and then the row after that, you'll know that this will be the last stitch to work. Okay, so I'll go ahead and finish half double crocheting on my row, one in every single stitch. Okay, so I'm wrapping up my third row here. We're just in this repeated section. Remember, rows 2 through 8 are a repeat, but I want you to see how the stitch marker system works. Now for me, I don't typically put my stitch marker here on the last stitch just because I know that it's my first one when I flip it over. So I'll just skip that first step. Now you don't have to if it's really helpful, but as soon as you make your first stitch, go ahead and mark it with a stitch marker. So the first stitch of every row, mark with a stitch marker, and I will work to the end of my row here just so you can see how that other stitch marker works. Now as I'm getting closer to that stitch marker, I will know that that one is my last stitch. So I'll release that marker, make a half double crochet in that stitch. I'll chain one, turn my work, make a half double crochet in the first one, and put my stitch marker into place. Okay, so that's all there is to it. What you want to do is continue this repeat until you have 8 rows. Now let's have a look at this just in case you're not familiar with counting the rows. You'll have an idea of where you are. We have row 1, row 2, row 3, and row 4, and I'm starting on row 5. So continue with this repeat until you have 8 rows of half double crochet worked in color A, and then we'll see what to do next. All right, now when you finish that 8th row, we will just work our stitch part of the way. So what I did here was I made a yarn over, I inserted my hook into the last stitch, and I pulled up a loop. And I need to make a color transition here. So I'll be transitioning to color B. You'll make a slip knot first. Then place that loop on your hook and pull it through all 3 of those loops. And that will finish that last stitch in your color A and then get you set up to work in color B. Now go ahead and trim color A and we're ready to go. So from here, what we'll do is we will chain 6. And this chain 6 will count as a triple treble. And then we'll turn our work. And since this counts as a stitch, I'm not going to work back in this stitch right here. I'll jump over to the next one, and I want to work a triple treble. So to do a triple treble, we need to wrap the yarn around the hook 4 times. So you'll have 4 wraps. Then you'll go into that next stitch. I'm catching both loops of the stitch. Pull up a loop. And these long stitches, they take a little bit of practice. What I like to do is keep my hook really close to the work and use my finger here in the background to make sure that my tension stays in check. It's really easy for things to get kind of loose for these stitches. So we'll yarn over and pull through 2, and we'll keep doing that until we only have 1 loop on our hook. And in the background here, I'm holding on to the stitch with my middle finger and sort of pulling down so that I can get my yarn through those 2 loops without stretching things out too much. You'll get much faster at these the more you do them, trust me. Okay, so at the beginning and the end of each one of these twist rows, we're going to have 2 triple trebles. One of them will be a chain, and in between there, we'll have our stitch pattern. So we do have a couple of repeats to keep track of for this middle section of our lap blanket. We'll have the stitch repeat within the row, and then we'll have the row repeat, and then we have our color repeat. Don't worry, this pattern, the more you do it, there are a lot of visual cues that'll guide you along the way, and you don't even really have to refer to the pattern. Okay, so in every situation, when you're starting one of those twists, you're always going to skip 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I will work my stitch in the 5th one, so I'm just going to hold on to that with those 2 fingers to let me know where to go. And this time, we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook 7 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And you can count them too. You'll insert your hook into that 5th stitch, then yarn over and pull up a loop. And just like we saw with the triple treble, I like to keep the hook real close to the work so I'm not stretching those loops out. And we'll yarn over and pull through 2 until we have only 1 loop remaining on our hook. Again, you can kind of see I'm holding on to the stitch with these two fingers, just helping me to keep my tension in check. All right, that's all there is to this stitch. Now we'll repeat that for the next 3 stitches as well. So we need to have a group of 4. These are called sextuple trebles in a row. So I've wrapped 7 times, inserting it into that next stitch and walking it back, as I call. Yarn over and pull through 2 until you only have 1 loop remaining. Now, once you have your 4 big tall stitches there in a row, next we're going to work in these skipped stitches, and that's what's going to give us that twist look. So part of the row repeat, basically what we do within this single row we're working on, is we change things up, but only in one way, and that is how we work these skipped 4 stitches. So for this particular row, row number 9, and for this particular twist, we'll work the next 4 stitches in these skipped stitches here, working in front. And that's what I want to explain how to do next. So go ahead and wrap your hook 7 times. Get those ready. What I like to do is just steady them with this finger. So I'm holding on. Otherwise, if you don't, they'll just fall right off, and then it gets really frustrating. So to work in front, that means I'm just going to shove what I have here to the back and just pretend like it doesn't even exist. What I like to do is grab the work here with those 2 fingers, and I'm just lining up those 4 stitches that I have to be worked, and then just stick your hook into the first of those 4, just having the other stuff sit there in the back, and you'll work your stitch as we just saw before. And then we'll do that for the other 3 skipped stitches as well, sort of working those in order. So wrap the yarn 7 times. Now insert your hook into that next one over. Whoops, and if that happens, sometimes I just kind of reset myself. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, lost a wrap there, and just start over. One more time in that last stitch. Now when you get finished with that, all 8 stitches, all 8 half double crochet stitches should have one of these sextuple trebles within it. So we didn't skip anything there. Okay, so that is one part of our stitch pattern repeat for this particular row. And just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to call this a front twist. So anytime you hear me say a front twist, this is what I'm talking about. So we've started row 9 with a front twist, and we need to follow that up with a back twist. Now remember I said before that doesn't matter which one of these twists you're working, we're always going to skip 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to hold on to 5 because that's where I want to work my next stitch. I'll wrap the yarn 7 times. Insert it into that one and complete the stitch. And remember, we're doing these in groups of 4, so this is the first of 4. So over the next 3 stitches, I'll do the same thing. Okay, so I have my 4 stitches there. Now I need to work in my skipped stitches. And because this one we'll call a back twist, rather than work in the front like we just saw, I'm going to work the stitches in the back. So to do that, go ahead and wrap the yarn 7 times. And this time we'll just take your fingers here, just sort of push those to the front. You can even just fold them down, pretend like they're not even there, and expose those 4 skipped stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'll work them in order, starting with this one. And I'll work my stitch as normal. I tend to sort of hold my work to the side too. It helps me work through these big tall stitches, especially when working in the back here. And we need a sextuple treble in each of those 4, so we'll work that 3 more times. Last one. All right, so that completes the back twist. And if you look at your work, you can see that the twist is in the opposite direction, and that's exactly what we want. So we've covered the row repeat there. Of course, here I just have a little snippet of the pattern, but what you'll do moving forward is your next twist will be a front twist, followed by a back twist, and then another front twist and a back twist, and you'll just keep doing that until you get to the end of your row. When you have 2 stitches remaining, then we'll work a triple treble in each of those 2. Now, if you've done everything correctly, remember we should have a total of 84 stitches when we end this half double crochet, this border row, then your multiple should work out perfectly fine. If that's not the case for you, I would go back and troubleshoot a little bit. It's really easy to skip one of the stitches here, either within the twist that's in the front or the back. There were even instances where I only worked 3 of 4 just because I wasn't paying attention. So if you don't have 2 stitches remaining, just double check this row and make sure everything worked out as it should. And if not, you may look at your stitch count. Now you don't have to rip everything out if you found that out to be the case. Let's say you only have 1 stitch remaining. What I would do instead of ripping everything out, to save yourself some time, I would just work 2 triple trebles in that last stitch, okay? That'll work things out for you. And then maybe from there, just make sure you count your stitches. You should have a total of 84. So for that triple treble, remember this time we'll wrap the yarn 4 times around the hook, and we'll do that in both of these stitches. All right, so that finishes row number 9. It's also the first row in our 4-row repeat. So moving on to row number 10, this is going to be a really simple row. We'll chain 1, turn our work, and this chain 1 will not count as a stitch for this row and for row number 12 as well. So we'll make 1 single crochet in our first stitch, and then 1 single crochet in every stitch to the end of the row. When you make it to the end of this row, remember that chain 6 at the beginning of the previous row, we said that counted as a stitch, and because of that we need to make sure we work a single crochet in the very top chain. That'll finish off the row, and if you want to go ahead and count, it's always a good idea, we'll have a total of 84 stitches. So that was the second row in our 4-row repeat. Let's move on to that third row, and this is also row number 11. So we have 9, 10, and 11. For this one, we will chain 6 as well. Turn our work. And this is another twist row, so we'll start this and finish this the same way that we did in row 9. So this counts as a triple treble. I'll work another triple treble in the stitch next to it. So the way we work our twists in this row versus row 9 here, that is completely the same. So we're always going to skip 4 stitches, work 4 sextuple trebles in the next 4, and then work in the skipped stitches. The only difference in this row compared to this one is the twist that we work. So remember on that first one we did a front twist, then a back twist. Well, for this one we're going to start with a back twist and then a front twist. So we'll go ahead and skip 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold on to this 5th one, wrap the yarn 7 times, and work 4 of these in a row. And when you get those 4, we're going to do a back twist. So wrap the yarn 7 times, pull your work forward, and get yourself set up so you can see those 4 skipped stitches, and you'll work a sextuple treble in each of those. Then when you work those 4 stitches there in the back, this is what our twist looks like. And what I want to point out here is the way this row works with this row. See how these stitches that are sort of in front make like a letter C? That's what we're going for. So that's your visual cue. You really don't have to memorize whether you're supposed to do a front twist or a back twist. You just need to pay attention to the stitches that are in the front on your previous row, and then you just work the twist that allows those stitches to sort of flow with each other. So let's practice that on this twist. Well, we always know that we have to skip 4 regardless of what twist we're doing. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to work in the 5th. Go ahead and get your 4 sextuple trebles there in a row. Then once you get those 4 done, then go ahead and look at the twist below and try to figure out what do I need to do next in order for these to kind of be sitting on top of each other. So since these are going in this way, I know it needs to curve this way. So it's going to be a frontward C, and it's also going to be a backward C. That's kind of the shape that we're going for. And to do that, I need these stitches to be in front, right? That way it'll go this way. So that's how I know this next one is a front twist. exposing those 4 skipped stitches you can see right there. What you'll need to do from here on out, you can either use that visual cue that I just showed you, or if you're better at memorizing, for this row, remember we started with a back twist followed by a front twist, so your next one will be a back twist followed by a front twist. You'll repeat that until you get to the end of your row, and when you do, you'll have 2 stitches remaining, and we'll do a triple treble in each of those 2 stitches. So remember, for that one, we wrap the yarn 4 times. And that'll do it for row 11. Now moving on to the 4th and final row in our stitch pattern repeat, or in our row repeat rather, we'll work row number 12, and this one is another single crochet row. So we'll chain 1, we'll turn our work. That chain 1 won't count as a stitch, and because of that, I will single crochet in my first one and in each stitch until I get to the end of the row. Now don't forget, when you get to the end of your row, your chain 6 there counts as a stitch, so I'll make my final single crochet in that stitch. Now that's all there is to the row repeat. We're going to repeat these 4 rows over and over, but the next thing we need to keep track of is our color repeat. The color repeat for this pattern will incorporate 6 different color blocks, and we've started right here. So we've already finished that bottom border in color A, and then we've moved on to the first color block in color B. So from here, we'll work a color block in color C, and then we'll repeat from there, color B, color C, color B, and color C. Now let me show you what's included in each one of these color blocks. So what we have here is a color block that's worked in color B, and we have a block that's worked in color C. Now look closely with me here, and we'll count how many rows are within each one of these color blocks. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So each color block is made up of 6 rows, but remember that our row repeat consists of 4 different rows. So we're repeating the same 4 rows over and over. For those of you who are following directly with the written instructions, our row repeat is rows 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then we repeat. So what would we do in this case? We would start over at 9, 10, 11, 12, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that's the trend, that's the color pattern for this lap blanket. Now with that color repeat in mind, what I need to do from this point on is work 1 more twist row and 1 more single crochet row. When I do that, I'll be ready to transition to color C, and so I'll just continue on with my repeat. So if you're following with the written instructions, we're jumping back to row number 9 for this next row. So I'll chain 6, I'll turn my work a triple treble in that next stitch, and then I'm ready with my stitch repeat for the row. And remember, for this one, we need to start with a front twist, and that'll all work out because you'll see the design kind of go from this way, back this way, but then it's going to sort of go in this direction. So remember, we're always skipping 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and working our sextuple trebles in the following 4. And working the front twist, so pushing those to the back. So you can see the direction of that, and from there I'll move on to my back twist. Then once you get finished with that back twist, you'll really start to see the pattern unfold. So this is the general shape we're going for. It's just going to kind of weave in and out just like that. So those are your visual cues. Remember what I showed you about watching the flow of it and letting that tell you if you need to work a front twist or back twist. So to complete this row, so we can work through this first color repeat, you'll repeat those last 2 twists over and over until you get to the end, and when you do, you'll make a triple treble in each of the last 2 stitches. So again, we're not changing anything with the stitch pattern here, just review. There we go. So we've finished up that row, and we'll move on to the next row, which if you are following with the written instructions and the repeat, we're repeating row number 10 here. Now when you get to your very last stitch, we'll just work it part of the way. So yarn over, pull through that chain to work half of your single crochet. We'll put that down and grab color C, create a slip knot. Place that on your hook and pull through. Now from here, we're ready to continue with our stitch pattern. Always keep in mind that we are working 3 of these big tall rows for each color. And with each one of those tall rows, we have to work a single crochet row so that we can tidy things up for the next row. And we're continuing on with that. So we will chain 6. Turn your work. Triple treble in the first stitch. And continue the stitch pattern, so cycling through those 4 rows over and over. Remember, at this point, you're halfway through that 4-row repeat. So for this one, you're repeating row 11 followed by row 12. All right, now once you have all of your color transitions, so we'll have 3 white and 3 red total that are alternating. Once you get through that repeat, then we're ready to transition back to color A. So I'll do so by leaving the last stitch halfway worked. So that single crochet, I've just yarned over and I pulled up a loop. Pull that through and it'll finish the stitch and it'll get me set up to work my next row. Now the repeat for the next 8 rows are the same that we saw for rows 1 through 8. So I've made a chain 1. I will turn my work. Like before, that chain 1 here doesn't count as a stitch at the beginning, so I will make my half double crochet in that first stitch. And 1 half double crochet into every stitch until I get to the end of the row. Now once again, the repeat here is the same, 1 half double crochet into every stitch for a total of 8 rows. We're basically just looking to match what happened on the bottom edge of our lap blanket. And when you get to the end of your row, you'll just half double crochet in that last stitch, chain 1, and repeat. So go ahead and do that until you have a total of 8 more rows worked in half double crochet here in color A, and we'll pick up right after that. Then once you get that completed, we can go ahead and fasten off and we'll start working on the side border. Now for each of the side borders, you'll need to have all 3 colors handy, and we're going to have sort of like a cleanup row. We want the color transition to be pretty uniform, and if we were to just work over the stitches here in one color, we would see that through and the edge would look a little bit more jagged. So what we'll do is we will start with color A. Go ahead and create your slip knot and place your hook around that first half double crochet of that first row. We'll fasten on here chain 1 to secure it, but that chain 1 will not count as a stitch, so I will go ahead and single crochet just around that same stitch. So now this is my next row. I will make a single crochet there. Next row, single crochet around that side stitch, and so on. When you've made it to your last stitch, only work that single crochet halfway. So yarn over and pull up a loop and leave it there. And we'll grab color C, which we see here, and I'm going to create a slip knot. And pull that through. Now we won't use this color until we get all the way to the bottom of our blanket, and it just makes a little more sense to go ahead and fasten off and join a new color. So I can trim this one and continue working. Now if you'd like, you can go ahead and work over these tails, that way you have a few less to weave in. I'll demonstrate that as well as weaving them in, so you can choose which option you prefer. Now the idea for these twist rows is to space 6 single crochet along that side stitch. So I'll just catch that stitch and those tails if this is the option you're choosing, and single crochet, and do that a total of 6 times. Now I won't do anything for this single crochet row. I'm just going to jump right over to my next twist row in that stitch there on the side, work 6 more single crochets around that stitch. Same thing, we'll skip that single crochet row. I'll make 6 single crochet around this last twist row in color C. And on that 6th single crochet, before you need to make your color transition, we'll grab color B. Same as before, I will make a slip knot, place it on my hook, pull it through the 2 loops to finish the stitch, and continue on in this color. To avoid creating more ends to weave in, what we'll do for these red and white sections in the middle, we will just work over our non-working strand. So I have my color C here steadied in the back with those 2 fingers, and I'm jumping down to the next twist row. The same sort of rule of thumb applies here. We'll space 6 single crochet around this side stitch of each of those rows, and we will continue to ignore those single crochet rows. When you get to your last single crochet before you're making the color transition back to color A, so blue here for me, I can fasten off color C, create a slip knot with color A, finish off that stitch by pulling it through, and then I can also fasten off color B. Now, like we did on the other side, for each one of our half double crochet rows, we will make 1 single crochet in color A. When you get to your last stitch or your last row, I like to make this one as close to the corner as possible. That way the shaping will be nice and even. And that's it. That's probably the most complicated row, definitely in the border, maybe even throughout the whole project. But that color work really does give it an extra finishing touch, if you will. Now, if you don't want to do this method, I completely understand. We are on a time crunch here, and you can very easily just work one solid single crochet row in your color A and work it all the way down the side in preparation for the side border. So that is another option. There's no restrictions there. You can do whichever you prefer, whatever you feel comfortable with. Now, once you've made it to the end of that row, I will say that the final stitch count doesn't matter so much, but I do want to give you those numbers in case you want to count. We will have a total of 124 single crochet all the way down to the end of your side border. But like I said, we're not working with a stitch multiple here, so if it's off by a couple stitches, it's really not a big deal. The main idea is that it's even, that everything is laying nice and straight. So at the end of this row, you'll chain one, we will turn our work, and from here on out, it's all half double crochets. That chain one will not count as a stitch. I will make one half double crochet in that first stitch and one half double crochet into every stitch until you get to the end of the row. And once you reach the end of that row, you'll chain one, turn your work, and continue with the same repeat. So we're matching what we see on the top and the bottom. So what you'll need to do from here on out is make one half double crochet into every stitch for a total of 8 rows. We've already worked 1, so we'll just work 7 more. So here is that second option for the side border. If you don't want to do any of that color work or carrying that yarn as you're working through these middle sections, then you can take this approach. It doesn't look quite as clean, and you'll see that as I work a few stitches through some of these contrasting colors, but it is a slightly easier approach if you're not comfortable working with multiple strands. So what we'll do is create a slipknot and place your hook just around that side stitch of that first half double crochet row. We'll chain one to secure it, but that won't count as a stitch. So I'll single crochet in the same place. And same rules apply here. For each of our half double crochet rows, we'll make one single crochet just around the side stitch. And then when we move on to here, to these twist sections, we'll have 6 single crochets spaced around these taller rows. Then once you get your 8 single crochet for those half double crochet rows, you'll find your next twist row, that tall stitch, and just evenly space 6 single crochet around that stitch. And what I like to do is take the stitches and sort of spread them out so that it's even. This is the part where it doesn't look quite as good because there's a big contrast between these two colors, so you can see the white through that. And if that bothers you, you may want to take that other approach, but if not, it's not a big deal. Then I will skip my single crochet row and work 6 more single crochet around this side stitch. And you'll continue on throughout your color transitions, just evenly spacing 6 single crochet around your twist rows and ignoring those single crochet rows. I'm not adding any stitches to the side of those. And when you've made it through the color B and C transitions, the stripes there in the middle, and you're back to your half double crochet rows, we'll make 1 single crochet in the side stitch of every row of half double crochet. We'll have a total of 8 here that we're adding to the end. So like before, you'll have a total of 124 stitches when you get to the end of this single crochet row. However, like I mentioned before, if you're off by a couple of stitches, it's not a big deal. We don't have a stitch multiple to work into. So from here, your repeat will be the same as the other option. We'll chain 1, turn our work, and we'll be working a half double crochet row, and we'll need a total of 8 of those. So your chain 1 will not count as a stitch. So you'll half double crochet in that first stitch, and once in every stitch for each of the next 8 rows. All right, now let's have a look at how to weave in these ends. I'll work on the half double crochet, the border rows here, and then I will demonstrate how to do it on the twist pattern as well. So what I like to do is run it along the bottom edge of a row of stitches. Just putting my needle underneath and working through a few stitches in one direction, pulling that through, then working it back in the opposite direction. And I like to do that at least 3 times so that I make sure it's nice and secure. Then once you have that all situated, you can simply trim that and you're good to go. So that's how I would weave in the ends along your border rows. Now let's look at how to weave in the ends along our stitch pattern here in the middle. Okay, so the big thing here is that we're working with different colors, right? I like to try to weave in my tails along a row of stitches that match the same color. So for this red tail, I don't really have a row of stitches that I can go into here because, well, there's some space there. So instead, what I'll do is run it up the side. Now this is that first option where I changed colors in that single crochet row. But if you did not do this, it's okay to go ahead and weave it along the top there just to get you to that single crochet row, and that's where I would try to weave in the tails. Now, of course, if you have a preferred method of doing this, this is really just one demonstration. You can do whatever you're comfortable with. Main goal is that they stay in and don't come out. I also find that if you're not quite neat about it, if you sort of split the yarn or split the stitches, they tend to stay in a little bit better. So you'll see I was pretty sloppy with that, just going back and forth, and that's how I know it'll stay in. So that's how to weave in the ends along your stitch pattern here in the middle. If you can, try to weave them in along your single crochet rows. That row is more dense, so it'll have a less chance of working itself back out, but do the best you can. For the written instructions and the supplies list, please head over to bhooked.com/WUA2019. Thank you so much for participating in the 2019 Crochet Challenge for Warm Up America.